and welcome to the BTEC Tech Award in Music Practice support session. I'll run through a few housekeeping things first of all. Firstly, the session is being recorded, so there will be a recording available after the session if you require that. So the first thing to cover is just a little bit of an update on performance measures. The slide that you will be able to see now is just slightly out of date now because of the BTEC First Award information, which I'll just update you with as well. So the BTEC First Award in Music is included on 2020 performance measures. The BTEC Tech Award in Music Practice is also included on 2020 performance measures. And the DFE confirmed that all qualifications included on 2020 performance measures will be included on 2021 and 2022 performance measures as well. There's a little sort of caveat to that, which is at the bottom of the slide, which is essentially the DFE reserves the right to remove any qualifications from the performance tables at any point. But that's based on evidence to indicate the qualification doesn't meet characteristics anymore. So there is that. Then this last point, this is the bit that's slightly out of date now because this says BTEC First Award currently has final registration date of 31st December 2019 and final certification 31st December 2021. That has just been updated and I believe an announcement went out yesterday or the day before to let centres know that this date has changed to final registration being 31st December 2021 and final certification 31st December 2023. So the first award in music is available for a few years longer as well, and obviously will be available for learners for inclusion on 2022 measures following that announcement from DFE. Okay. So firstly, an overview of the BTEC Tech Award and the differences between that and the first award. So the structure of it is quite different. It's now 3 mandatory components, but the content that's included in that I think is a little more flexible in approach than the first award as well. There is no exam. The external assessment is task-based for the Tech Award, so that can suit learners much better as they're not sitting doing a written exam. They're actually practically engaging and creating music as well. Also, another good thing about the Tech Award is that it has graded level 1, which means that for learners that are achieving a level 1 qualification, can now come out with a level 1 pass, merit and distinction for the qualification overall as well. And that also means that in terms of performance measures, excuse me, that's better as well as it's more comparable with the 9-to-1 grading for GCSE in that level 1 pass is 1.25 performance points, a level 1 merit is 2 off the top of my head, and a level 1 distinction is 3. performance points. So it's more in line with the 9-to-1 grading, whereas with the BTEC First Award, if a student ended up with a level 1 fallback, that was just 1.25 performance points, and that was it. So it didn't work out particularly favourably in terms of performance measures there as well. So component 1 is exploring music products and styles. And the key points of the component are about exploring techniques of music and the musical elements, and key features of different musical styles. Some of you may be delivering this already and may be working towards the first assessment of that with your learners, and the main session of this will look at the component 1 in a bit more detail as well, and we can discuss ways of approaching it as well. Component 2 is music skills development, and this focuses on the individual learner a bit more, and we'll focus on developing their personal and professional skills, and also developing their individual music skills as well. So that is much more focused on developing a skills audit and development plan in there as well. And I am running a session next week on component 2 as well, if you haven't signed up for that one already. And then component 3 is the external assessment, which is responding to a commercial music brief. It's a synoptic assessment, so it's bringing together the learning from the other components, and also putting it in a professional scenario as well. So there will be a brief, and learners will look at and learn about how to respond to a brief, and then select and apply the music skills that they've learned throughout the course to respond to that brief and create a piece of music, essentially. We'll pause there for a second and just ask if there's any questions at this point. It doesn't seem to be at the moment, so we'll move on. Looking at component 1 in a bit more detail, we'll look at some possible approaches, and essentially where you might want to focus learners when they respond to the briefs that you set them, the assignments that you set them. So learning aim A can be approached in a couple of different ways. I know that some centres are looking at it from a stylistic focus, by looking at different genres and eras of music, or it can be done by looking at the different musical elements as well, and we'll run through that in a little bit more detail on the next slide as well. There are authorised assignment briefs for the component. In fact, there's one authorised assignment brief which covers both learning aims for this component. And for learning aim A, it requires at least 8 short examples of different genres, and they have to cover performance, composing and production. So throughout the course there's 3 skills and disciplines really around creating music, and they are performance, we call it creating, and production, although creating, although can be composing, can be more remixing and those sorts of skills as well, as we move through on the other components as well. But for this learning aim, it's very much looking at the key aspects of performance, composing and production. Although it can be solely listening examples, it is best explored practically, and examples of the learner demonstrating the techniques are being encouraged. So this is a question that's come up a few times, is about having a focus for the Tech Award as a whole. My students aren't performers. They don't perform any music really. They're much more interested in music technology. Is quite a common question that I get in. So it is possible to do that and do the course as a music technology type course. And even though in this first component we do want them to look at the examples of performance and talk about those and give examples of those, they don't have to perform. They can choose examples from pre-existing tracks and use those short clips to show the skills and the techniques that they're talking about. However, as we've said, it is being encouraged that they do practically engage with those exercises as well. So it would be great, even though they aren't performers as such, you can get students practicing, say, a blues scale or a 12-bar blues chord pattern, walking bass line, those sorts of things as examples of techniques that they can demonstrate, and just have a short clip of them demonstrating that and then talking about those. So although they don't have to perform, it would be great if they are encouraged to at least engage a little bit with those sorts of things. But the same can be said about your performing students that may not be wholly into music technology and production. Again, they don't have to demonstrate those skills as such, but it would be really good for them to be able to, for example, input a drum and bass drum beat using a sequencer, or demonstrate a production technique, of a little bit of sampling or something like that when using a DAW. So there's various different ways that they can demonstrate those skills practically as well. So looking at it in a genres-based approach, in this example we took various different examples of different music and showed how they can cover different eras and possibly the different approaches in terms of performing, composing and production as well. So synth pop, obviously strong 80s sort of feel around a lot of synth pop, and that can be a really good example of covering the music technology production side of things, as there's a heavy influence around MIDI and sequencing coming in throughout that era as well. We selected film music as it can cover classical music in there as well, but could also cover music technology. We're not sort of keeping it film music within the sort of John Williams-esque type style. That can be any film music, but obviously there's a couple of different approaches that you can take there. We put Bhangra in there as that covers the world music, and I know that some centres are also doing like an African drumming type thing as well, which obviously would cover world music and can be really good for covering the rhythmic elements as well. Blues, with the early foundations of pop music, and some key technical and compositional things can be used in there as well. We chose British Invasion for 60s, disco 70s, grunge 90s, and then electronic dance music of the noughties. Again, each of those can cover some key aspects of the stylistic elements that can come into it, and can also quite easily be used to cover the aspects of performing, composing and production in there as well. Then the other approach, as mentioned, is looking at it from a musical elements point of view. So taking it as rhythm, and again, mentioned about the African drumming, samba, techno, drum and bass can obviously cover those rhythmic elements quite well. There's obviously heavy influence of rhythmic patterns throughout all of those styles. That's one approach. Then we've got scales, tonality and melody. And you can choose styles such as blues, jazz, film music, rock, world music to cover key aspects of those. Again, chords and harmony, classical music, film music, blues and rock have got some key elements that you can cover there. And then instrumentation and timbre, obviously film music can take in many different forms and have some key instruments and timbre there. Okay, I have a question coming over the chat which I'll just answer in 1 second as well. And then obviously instrumentation and timbre for world music, rock and classical. So the question is, can the music samples be group performances as long as the candidates are actually performing in some capacity? So for the examples used in Learning Aim A, as long as they are actively involved with that, there shouldn't be a problem with the samples that are using being taken from group performances. I think obviously with the African drumming thing and the samba stuff, that does lean towards group performances there. And again, we're looking for only short examples really, so 10-15 second clips of just demonstrating a certain technique or musical element. So yeah, so in Learning Aim A, there's nothing wrong with using group performances to cover the examples of music that they're doing, because as I said, they don't have to perform or do music technology or compose anything. They can use pre-existing pieces of music to demonstrate those techniques. So the main focus is for Learning Aim A is for them to pick out these techniques and key elements of the styles and music and be able to identify them and explain them and show those techniques as well. Okay, moving on to so yes, the presentation can be available offline. In fact, it's in there is a materials section where you can download it now, the slides for this as well. And there will be an email that comes around after the session with a link to that as well. So moving on to Learning Aim B, this one requires learners to produce 30 to 60 second examples of music products chosen from the list that we'll go through in a second, and add these to their portfolio of work. learners need to cover at least 3 products from the following list using different styles and techniques for each of them. So these are listed in the specification and are a live performance, an audio recording, music for media, computer games, film. We've put in brackets not necessarily on computer, so it could be like an Einaudi piano type composition, an original song or composition, and a DAW project. So, and this is where you can start to select things to focus your learners down particular routes if that's the way you deliver the course. If they are more performers and that's the way that you're looking to go with the course, the 3 products that you would likely be looking at having your learners produce material for this would be a live performance, possibly music for film, media, computer games, as that can lean towards a live performance as well, and an original song. Again, it's something that can be a live performance there. So that can be a heavily sort of route to go down if you have learners that are more performers and not particularly interested in music technology that much. The production route, you would likely choose an audio recording. And when we're talking about an audio recording, this is where that student is acting as the sound engineer. So they are setting up microphones and producing a recording of a piece of music. So there may be other learners that are performing on this recording, so they don't necessarily have to perform on the recording, but they are in charge of the recording process. Again, music for film, media, computer games, because that can be quite a heavily sort of computer-based production type project that they work on. And then we've also said a DAW project, because obviously, again, that's computer-based production-wise work. Now, obviously, their music, film, media, computer game thing could be a DAW project as well. But that's more likely to be an original piece of music, where the DAW project doesn't have to be. That could be them using samples and remixing something into a piece of music. Then there's also a composition route, where you would likely focus things around, again, music, film, media, computer games, because they can create some original composition work there. Obviously, the original song or composition, and a DAW project. So for Learning A/B, can my students submit several composition examples? I would say, in terms of that question, it depends on how they are approaching those compositions and the purpose of those compositions. So you could, for example, say that an original composition, and again, remember, it's only 30 to 60-second examples, so they're not completed pieces. One could be a composition that is for a film or media, as an example. So yes, then they can submit an original composition, and then their DAW project could be another composition as well. So it is possible to have students submit several composition examples, but it's just in terms of the way they are presented and what product they are for, would be my answer to that question. So as you can see, there are different routes that you can start to focus component 1 on, as it moves through the component, particularly with this learning aim B. So learning aim A is very much this broad look at different styles of music and the techniques involved there. And then learning aim B is very much taking the knowledge of those styles and the techniques and using that to create some original work by the learner as well. So taking those for a live performance, performing in a particular style, thinking about the sounds and the techniques that style uses. Again, audio recording would probably look at the techniques and the miking and the way a certain style is recorded as well, and thinking about how that would be approached. And then obviously the other things in terms of an original song, if it's in a particular style, there'd be certain elements that would be looked for in that as well. So it's all linking to having knowledge of these different styles of music and the musical elements and building those into the examples of music products that the learners are then creating. So at this point, really, that's kind of covered a lot of the content. It's really now opening it up to questions from you, and if you've got any particular questions about component 1, how the content that's covered in terms of how to approach the assessment, anything like that, this is your opportunity really. So I'll wait for any questions to come in. Okay, so a question has been asked: as it's a blog, can we still present as Word with audio inserts, etc.? Yeah, so I mean, the scenario given in the authorized assignment brief is around about a blog, but the way that you present that can depend on your learners and the resources that you have available. Yeah, I mean, we took that as a blog being a more up-to-date way of presenting information and kind of relevant to the music industry as well, in terms of the way that musicians would be able to present themselves and market themselves in the real world, as it can build up their portfolio and online profile over time. But certainly you can use PowerPoint, Word, etc., and insert clips into that and have students present that. So, and you're free to change those authorized assignment briefs as well. So you can change the wording of the scenario to suit your needs and your learners as well. So you're not stuck rigidly with that assignment brief. Obviously, you can use it as it is, but you can certainly adapt it to meet your requirements as well. Okay, so we've got a question: does learning aim B have to focus on a particular route, or can they do a mixture? It's absolutely fine to do a mixture of everything. The reason we suggested possible routes in there is because just knowing how people designed the first award, lots of centres did have a particular route in there. So a lot of centres would, for example, choose it as more of a production type qualification. So they'd have the core units of unit 1 and 2 in there, but for the optional units they would choose sequencing and recording to make it more music tech focused, whereas other centres would keep it a bit more like a GCSE in terms of skills covered and choose performing and composing. So that was the only reason why we suggested some possible routes and focus to the Learning Aim B, is to really allay the concerns from centres that were thinking that they had to cover all three aspects in there and have students perform, compose and create and do production work. Whereas actually, yes, you can do that, but also you can focus that a little bit more in terms of the Learning Aim B for component 1. Okay, if there aren't any more questions coming in, I'd just like to say thank you very much for attending. I hope you found it useful and has given you some ideas for the approach to component 1. As I said, the presentation is available for download now in the materials section, but you'll also get an email with the link in for that as well. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for attending.